morning, people. How are we doing today? Okay, you all are messing with my brain because this is the most depressing time of year, right? And you guys are like energetic. I'm soaking this in because I'm waking up in the morning and going, oh, it's March. And part of it, my season is all based around the Seahawks anyway, so it's so far away, so like all the way around, man. But man, you guys are encouraging, and so thank you for that. That's just giving me a little bit of energy this morning. Now, before we get underway, I want to go ahead and give an update. We haven't given an update for a while, but if I take you in the way, way back Doc Brown DeLorean for just a minute, we know that just about 6 months ago, roughly, we decided to go about purchasing a new space that eventually can become our Sunday morning suite, right? But in the meantime, it's our new hub, and we've moved in. We've been doing all kinds of ministry stuff down there. Very cool. In fact, this week, I had somebody send me an email even sharing that there's a website here in town that's like slang, like Duvall slang, right? So it's kind of like, if you move here and you don't know what all the slang words are, you can go to this website and learn all the slang for our community, right? So like the WD is or Woodinville Duvall Road and things like that. But the hub was on the slang list, which was very cool. Yeah, so that's awesome. So it's showing that we are clearly making some kind of connection with our community, and our space is used for the greater community. So that was very cool. So we purchased a new hub, and then we put before all of you the idea of, man, we need to raise funds so that one day we can do this. And so when we decided to roll that out, we said that our initial target, even the project is bigger than this, but the initial target we wanted to hit in 3 years was $1 million, right? That was our goal. So starting in late September, early October, we said we want to take 3 years to raise $1 million. So that was, like I said, late September. As of the middle of March, so far, you all have contributed $447,000. Unbelievable, really amazing, unbelievable. Now, during that time, a couple of things that we've been able to do. One is something we didn't anticipate. We bought this property. That's another cool thing. So that is complete. So obviously at the hub, just south of the hub is this space, and so we're looking at that for parking and some other things. So of course with that, we didn't originally plan on that, so that was kind of an added cost, but we were able to buy that outright cash, which was awesome. So that was all settled and everything else. So we've also begun the process of beginning to talk with architects, and that's going to be kind of a longer process. There's a number of reasons for that. We have to work with the city and the county, and all kinds of things are going on. But I can give you at least a little sneak peek of things that are beginning to get sketched out, that the architect's kind of playing with, looking at ideas and options. We're kind of looking at option A, B, and C. Working on that. So hopefully in the coming months, we'll be able to show you a little bit more. But we just wanted to give you that update, let you know what's going on. And we wanted to thank you for your generosity. You have been amazingly generous in this process, and I am just grateful for that. And I know that you're going to continue to be generous, and I am so grateful for that as well. All of the elders are so grateful. Thank you for how you have just moved on this. And it's been just a great thing to see God open doors and work and move, and we know He's going to continue to do that. So again, we are just grateful for your generosity and grateful for your investment into our community here, because we really do want to impact this location in such a way that we are doing what we do for the good of the city. That is very much a part of our mission statement, always for the good of the city. And so we want to continue to be here for the good of the city. So with that, I want to pray so that we can also spiritually be calibrated in such a way that we're good for the city as Jesus uses our lives to reach the people around us. So let's go ahead and pray together as we get ready for today. Jesus, I thank you for your word. I thank you for your will. I thank you for the message that you give us, that you save us by grace, you complete us by grace, and you do so even in our brokenness. And I pray that it's that message that we could adopt into our lives in such a way that as we're interacting with those who do not know you, they will be marked by this idea that we are advocating for, which is it's not our efforts that merit our worthiness in your eyes. It is your grace that works through you, Jesus, because you came for us, you died for us, you took our baggage, you gave us your goodness and your righteousness so that we might be your kids. And I pray that it's that really holds us, that in our community that we would be known for grace more than really any other thing, that we would be known for wanting to make much of you and your glory more than we're known for a lot of other things that may be lesser. And so help us to truly embrace, adopt, and promote the power of grace in the lives of broken people. We thank you so much for the grace that has been thrust into our lives, and I pray that we would live from that same grace. We love you and we thank you. We need you, and we praise you in your name. Amen. So when Ellen and I originally moved to Washington, we lived in Spokane for roughly about 18 years. And typically on Sunday mornings, I make fun of Spokane. And I can do that because I live there long enough. I'm allowed to. But there's some things about Spokane that far outshine the greater Seattle area, right? And one in particular was the fact that when somebody sat down to construct Spokane, they said, you know what, we should do roads that just crisscross. We should just lay it out like a grid, and then people could find things really easy. It'd be super simple. So in Spokane, that's the way it's laid out. You've got Division running this way, you've got Sprague running this way, and all the roads are just kind of running parallel to those two things, right? So it's easy to get around. You can't really get lost in Spokane. It's so easy to get around. And what's cool about that is if traffic's kind of crazy, you can be like, I'm going to take a shortcut through that neighborhood. And you just go straight down, straight up. You're good. You took a shortcut. So then I move here to the west side, right? And here's what I've decided. This is the way they decided, especially to lay out places like Bothell and Kirkland, the neighborhoods. They took a guy named Billy Bob. They gave him a blindfold, like a kilo of cannabis and a tractor. And they said, go carve some roads, Billy Bob, right? And so here, I remember like when I first moved here, we like get in traffic. I'm like, I bet I could cut through that neighborhood, just a shortcut really quick. Right? And you go into that neighborhood, and then all of a sudden it's a T, right? And then you're like, oh, I'll go right, And you go right, and then it's like an S, and then it's like a squiggly thing, and then it goes down, and then you end up at just like a pond that gathers rain, right? Right? And then you're like all the way, and you're trying to find, and you're just like, I don't even know. I'm in a labyrinth now. I don't even know how to get out of this place. And by the time your shortcut is over, it's been a long, hard, frustrating road, right? That's how it works over here. And as I was thinking about that this week, I thought, man, there is a parallel. There is a lesson to be learned in an idea of shortcuts that end up being long, hard roads. And in particular, as I was thinking about it, I thought about it when it comes to our own struggle with sin, right? Because even though we're Christians, we are imperfect people. I mean, that's why we have the motto that we do as a church. We're imperfect people redeemed by a perfect God. And in our imperfection, many times what we do is we go to these things that God says, this is not my best. This is not what I would encourage you in. This is a sin area. But we adopt that sin area because we think it's going to be a shortcut. In some way, it's going to get me to my pleasure faster. It's going to get me to my security faster. It's going to get me to what I want faster. It's going to get my way faster, whatever it is. So there's all these things that in life we treat as shortcuts that are actually sins. And we think it's going to provide me what I want in a timely fashion. But in the way that it goes, it ends up being a long road and a long route, with a lot of pain at times, some hurt, some challenge, and some suffering. And so that's the idea I want us to have in our mind today. In fact, even if you're a note taker, I want you just to write that down. Sin is the promise of a shortcut that always ends in a long, hard road. Sin is the promise of a shortcut that always ends in a long, hard road. Now, to anchor this, I want you to open to the book of Genesis, first book of the Bible, written by Moses to a bunch of refugees about their history. And it's a history that pertains to kind of the founder of their people group, right? The Israelites were founded with a man named Abraham. And we looked at his story a little bit last week, and we're going to continue his story today. Now, as we look at his story, I want us to keep in mind what is true to what God has promised in Genesis. God promised to Noah after the great flood that he was going to work within the system, right? He would no longer worry about, I'm going to destroy everybody with a flood. I'm going to destroy all things that creep on the earth. He says, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to work in the system. So I'm going to work in the brokenness. I'm going to subvert the brokenness to my purposes. And that is true not just in general, but it's true also to people. God will work in and through broken people to bring forth his perfect plan. So God's working in the system of brokenness, and we see the system of brokenness at work, in play, and yet God working in the brokenness through the life of Abraham. And today we're going to look at not one, not two, but 3 instances where he's clearly acting in broken ways, where he's using sin in a shortcut manner, and it's resulting in long, hard roads, right? And hopefully from that, we will learn what's so incredible then about grace, because what we're going to discover is that Abraham isn't necessarily a good guy, but he is rescued by a good God. He's rescued by a good God who has grace in the mix, and he's going to grow Abraham even through his failures. Because what we're learning is that not only does grace save us, but grace, it also grows us. And sometimes it grows us because we make mistakes, and we have to be right with God and right with others. When we make those mistakes, that's all of how grace continues to grow. And so we're going to see grace at work in the life of Abraham. Now, at this point, he's still Abram. It's his original birth name. And in Genesis chapter 12, I want us to start in verse 7. So last week, we noted that he was a pagan, right? Literally a pagan. He served other gods, it says. He served other gods. And so he's a pagan guy serving other gods, and God then just steps in grace and rescues him and changes him, right? And says, I'm going to do something in your life totally crazy and different. And so Abe listens. He's all right, I guess I'm going to go wherever God wants me to go. So then it says, starting in verse 7, the Lord appeared to Abram, and he said, to your offspring I will give this land. Again, the promise is reinforced again. So it says, so he built an altar to the Lord who had appeared to him. And from there he moved to the hill country east of Bethel, and he pitched his tent, right? And again, between Bethel and Ai in the east, he built an altar to the Lord, and there he called upon the name of the Lord. So twice now you see there's these scenes where he moves and he worships. And then he moves and he worships. And I want you to, we might read this, if you go through like the Bible in a year and you're reading Genesis, you may just blow over the top of that. But it's valuable. Because anytime, if you've ever moved, you know how stressful that is. Right? Moving is hard, moving is stressful. And imagine you're moving, thousands of years ago. It's not easy. But every time there was stress, he would stop and he would worship. And that calibrates your life. Anytime there is stress or challenge or a big seismic shift in your world, you should stop and worship. And that helps, again, like I said, calibrate you in such a way that you can handle the challenges that may be next. And so we see that he does this twice. With each move, there's worship. In the second one, there's worship, and he calls on the Lord. In fact, if anything, I would say is the big idea that you want to walk away from with this is, proximity and presence with God. That is going to serve your life well. That's going to serve your life when it comes to things like fears or vices or challenges. When you're close to God, that's where there's safety and security, because it's not about you being strong in and of yourself. It's about being so close to God that God's strength is working in and through you to his purposes. And so Abe is fine when Abe is near God. Abe is fine when he is close to God, when he's not trying to be fortified on his own, but rather he's finding fortification from God who fortifies him. But it's going to be tough. Life is going to test his faith. And as we even looked at last week, doubt is something that he struggles with. Abe is a guy that has a lot of doubt challenges, right? And his doubt is going to be stimulated in this little section. And you're going to see where he's not seeking God, but rather he's starting to seek other things. And so he starts to take a shortcut that's going to be a long, hard road. Because we see what happens then in life is something that happens so often. Life gets off the rails a little bit. And here it says there was a famine that suddenly struck the land. That'll be the test. That'll be the temptation. That'll be the challenge, right? So a famine hits. So with the famine, instead of him saying, so I'm going to worship again, he says, no, I'm just going to move. So it says, Abram went down to Egypt to sojourn there, for the famine was severe in the land. And as he goes down, it doesn't say he built an altar, doesn't say he worshiped, doesn't say he did anything, it just says he moved, right? And when he was about to enter Egypt, this is what he says to Sarai, his wife. He says, I know that you are a woman who is beautiful in appearance. And when the Egyptians see you, they will say, this is his wife? That's how I feel about when people see me with Ellen. Really? She married that guy? That's exactly how I feel, right? This is his wife, right? He says, and then they will kill me, but they will let you live. So here's what I want you to do instead. I want you to say that you're my sister. And he says, and here's why I want you to say that. I want you to pay attention to this. Say that you are my sister, first of all, that it may go well with me because of you. That's the first one. And then the second one is, and say they don't kill me, right? But that's a broken priority to me. I get like if he's like, first of all, I want you to say that, we're brother and sister so they don't kill me. And that's all. That's the reason. But no, he's like, so life goes well for me if we do this. And hopefully, too, I don't lose my life. That would be swell, right? Now, what are some things we can pick up about this? Well, first is that the outside pressures are beginning to distort his perspectives. So instead of there being a famine and he goes to God and says, God, you promised to make me a great nation. God, you promised to give me an heir. God, you promised to take care of me. So in the midst of the famine, God, what are you going to do? He's not doing that. He immediately starts looking at the problem and he starts worrying more than he's worshiping. Right? He starts automatically trying to solve the problem more than seek his God who has made him a promise. So he's getting in the mix in a wrong way. And then from that, the second thing you see is that he's looking out at the surroundings more than up toward his God, saying, God, how are you going to solve this? How are you going to step in, invade the space, and do something big because you're a keeper of your promises? No, instead, what he's starting to do is something that is so easy to do when we feel pressed against a wall in life. It's a simple word. He's starting to scheme. He's starting to scheme, actually, right? Because he's looking and he's like, well, if I just go off of the promise, that doesn't seem very practical. If I just believe God at his word, that's not realistic. So he starts working out this plan that says, okay, I've got to go to Egypt. How are we going to make it work? It is a famine. It's tough. What am I going to do? Well, I got some options here. What are my options? And so he starts to scheme. He's like, what would be my opportunities in Egypt? Right? What are the things I most fear, and how can I alleviate those fears with security? How can I get security while I'm in Egypt? How could I manipulate the system to work for me, for my good, more than worrying about maybe what God's best is? And so this is what I mean by he's starting to scheme. And so as the story goes on, we see that he's so focused on his comfort, on his life, on his provision, and on his security, he looks at his wife and says, I need you to do me a favor. I need you to lie. I mean, as soon as you're turning to somebody you're close to and saying, do me a favor, lie for me, you're in bad space. You're in bad space. What's crazy about this is it's more than just, honey, I need you to lie. The scheme is big. It says in verse 14, when Abram entered Egypt, the Egyptians saw that the woman was very beautiful. And when the princes of Pharaoh saw her, they praised her to Pharaoh. And this is where it's key. And the woman was taken into Pharaoh's house. And for her sake, he dealt well with Abram. For he had sheep and oxen and male donkeys and male servants and female donkeys and camels. Now, I want to give a disclaimer right now. My job today is to totally destroy our heroes of faith. That's my job, right? Because that's what it's going to feel like, right? Because I want you to think about this. First of all, what's Abe know? Abe knows his wife is a looker, right? And so much so that he goes, man, when we go to Egypt, man, everybody's going to be catcalling this lady of mine. It's going to be a problem. And instead of him stepping back and saying, wait, if I go to Egypt with my wife, they're all going to be hitting on her. That's a bad idea. We're not going to Egypt. God, you got to take care of us in the famine. He processes this through. And instead of saying, we're not going because it's dangerous, he says, she's a looker. This could work to my advantage. We're going. Right? He doesn't look at the threat as something to be avoided. He looks at the threat as an opportunity to be exploited. So this is a bad husband. This is more than just lie. Right? He's starting to use his wife as a type of bait, for no better way of putting it. And he's scheming to do it so. Now the plan, it seems to work. People do recognize that she's beautiful, works its way up the ladder, goes all the way to Pharaoh. Pharaoh says, hey, I'm very interested in her. And it says, he takes her into his house. This is not for tea. Right? This is not to play Monopoly. This is Netflix and chill right here, is what this is. All right? I want to be clear. This is a sexual activity, right? So Abe knows exactly what he's doing, right? And he knows that he's putting his wife in this particular space, and yet it's going to serve him. And notice that it does. What does he get in exchange? Well, it says here he ends up with sheep and ox and male donkeys and male servants and female servants and female donkeys and camels. See, this happens because when he told his wife, say that I'm your brother, that gave him the power to broker his wife. Because in that culture, either your father or your brother basically could trade you as a commodity if you were a female. So this isn't just, hey, let's just look like we're family so that nobody kills me. It's more than that. He's like, and if need be, if I can make something off of you, I'm going to do that. Like I said, Abe is not a good guy. Abe is not a good guy in the least, right? Fundamentally, he is sex trafficking his wife. That's how much his doubt and his fear and this idea of a shortcut that ends up being a long, hard road, I mean, that's how much it's grabbed onto him. See, typically, like in Sunday school, we have this picture of Abe. We can bring the picture up. It's kind of a cartoon picture. We go, this is Abe, right? I mean, this is how we think of Abe. Let me show you what Abe was really like. That's Abe. That's, right? So, destroyer of all biblical heroes everywhere. All right, so, right? But that's really what's going on. I want to be clear. But I also want us to watch out, because at that point, it's very easy for us to go, what a dirtball, what a jerk, whatever. And I go, you know what? What Abe is an accelerated version of what we all flirt with, right? And that's where I want to be clear. Abe is an accelerated version of what we all flirt with any time in life, where we decide that, you know what, the conditions aren't shaping up as I want, and instead of trusting God, I'm going to take it into my own hands. We flirt with the same thing he did. He went like much further down the road. I think he stands as a great example of what not to do, but we all flirt with that. And it usually is a series of justifications, right? Where we just start kind of, well, I need this, and there's this problem, and I know I got to cheat this to do that, but what? And it just makes a complete wreck and mess of things. It's easy to sell out our faith or our ethics or our values or our virtues or our ideals because we have wants or needs or fears, and we let those get in the way. And so he schemes, plan works, and he gains from it, at least in kind of a tangible way he gains. But here's the other thing then about Abe's decisions here. Right now, he's the dude most sinning, and frankly, he's the guy getting the most from his sin. Maybe this is another lesson we should start to emerge with today, which is oftentimes when we take these shortcuts that lead to long, hard roads, the people around us get more hurt than we do, right? Especially initially. Oftentimes, the people around us get more hurt by our sinful actions than we do. And that's what happens in this particular context, right? It says in verse 17, but the Lord afflicted Pharaoh and his house with great plagues because of Sarai, Abram's wife. So imagine Pharaoh. He went into this deal thinking it was clean, right? Oh, that's your brother. Oh, he can broker a deal. Oh, I get her to be mine now. Awesome. Here's a bunch of stuff. It's a transaction. He thinks that, man, this is a clean title on this wife, right? And now he's finding out, no, this is not the case. And suddenly he's afflicted. His whole household is afflicted. I'm sure he's like, wait a minute, I don't even know what I did wrong. But sometimes our sins hurt those around us more than they hurt us. And what's tragic about this is you go back to the promise that God gave to Abe. God told Abram, through you, I'm going to bless the nations. I'm going to bless the nations through your faithfulness. But here, Abe is faithless, and what's happening to a nation? It's being cursed. It's being hurt. It's having pain inflicted on it because of his faithlessness. So instead of blessing, he's cursing. But even in this, God is leveraging these plagues in his grace. Right? This is God's grace in action. You may not think, oh, a plague is God's grace, but it's a plague to step in and overturn Abe's faithlessness. So God is still intervening. This is part of God's grace. God intervenes in our folly, right? He intervenes in our folly with his grace. And so God is intervening. So it says, then Pharaoh called Abram and he said, what is this that you have done to me? Why did you not tell me that she was your wife? Why did you say she is my sister? Blah, blah, blah. You can put blah, blah, blah in there. It fits. So that I took her for my wife. Now then, here is your wife. Take her and go. And Pharaoh gave men orders concerning him, and they sent him away with his wife and all that he had. Pharaoh isn't even angry at this point as much as he is freaked out. He is so freaked out, he just wants them all to go. He doesn't even say, I want my donkeys back and my camels back and my people back. He's like, just go. It's like breaking up with a crazy girlfriend, you know? Like, just, you can keep my American Eagle sweatshirt and my, just everything. You can keep my ZZ Top collection. I don't care. Like, just go. Go at him. Like, just crazy, right? Just go. And so they go, right? Right? And so Abe, sinful guy, right? God is faithful. Abe is sinful. And I think we sometimes struggle with this because this is part of why grace is so crazy. There's this little passage in 2 Timothy that says, when we are faithless, he remains faithful, for he cannot deny himself. And this goes back to, why did God choose Abe? Because Abe was smart, because he was godly, because he was clever, because he was a man of ingenuity and forethought. No, God didn't choose Abe for any of those reasons. He chose him simply because God wanted to set his love on him. And then made a promise that says, I'm going to use you to do things. Now, you're going to do some dumb stuff in the midst of that, but I'm going to use you to change the world. And in the same way in our own lives, what's so crazy about grace is that grace steps in and God sets his love on us, not because we're awesome, but because he just chooses to do that in his grace. And then when we're making mistakes, that same grace is still there and says, even when you're faithless, I am faithful because I can't deny myself. I've told myself, I love that one. I'm going to use that one. That one is mine. Even when we're broken. Even when we choose a lot of shortcuts that are just really long roads in the end, right? And so God is working in Abe, even though Abe is not always working for God. Now, you might look at this and go, well, after an incident like that can scare you straight at least, right? I mean, you get caught using this line, she's my sister, and you'll never use that one again. You won't run to that one again. You ever gotten caught for something that you knew was wrong? Right? Maybe when you were a kid, you got caught doing something and you're like, I promise Mom and Dad I'll never do it again. Right? And then like 6 months later, you sneak it in. Right? Maybe it's as an adult, you've had those things. I'll never do it. Jesus, if you get me out of this, I'll never do it. I promise. I'll go clean. I'll go straight. But then like a year or two later, you kind of pull it back into the fray. Well, Abe struggles with the same thing because Abe struggles with doubt, right? And so he begins in his doubt to seek shortcut solutions instead of looking to God. Go to Genesis chapter 20. Now again, I'm sure he wouldn't do the same thing over, right? Sure. Genesis 20. It says, from there, Abraham, his name has changed. God has been more clear with him. He's deposited true faith into the life of Abe, and he is Abraham. And from there, Abraham journeyed toward the territory of the Negeb, right? And he starts to plant there for a while. But then he starts to think. And so he said to Sarah, his wife, she's my sister, when he meets this guy, Abimelech, the king. Right? So no sooner does he move someplace, meets a new king, she's my wife. Same thing, you dipstick. You know, like, honestly, I look and I go, did you learn nothing? But it reminds me, I can sit there and judge him again, but the more I look at Abe, the more I don't judge. I think I go, man, I want to learn from him. Because I think what's true is it's always very easy to succumb to old sins, old failures, old habits, if we're not keeping our proximity close with God, right? I don't think any of us truly graduate from sin school in this life. We just don't graduate. And there may be things that we conquer at some point, but then years down the road, we think, I've got that one mastered. And it's when we think we haven't mastered, ready, and here's the operative thing, in our own strength, then it can haunt, right? And so here Abe is in a weird spot. For whatever reason, he has fear and doubt again. And so he begins to justify his compromise here, right? And he's like, I'll just say she's my sister because that keeps us out of trouble. I mean, last time I said that, you know, the guy was freaked out, but he gave me stuff. I got all kinds of cool stuff. So maybe I'll just run to it. And I think that's always going to be that temptation we have, that idea of justifying where we're beginning to compromise, justifying the shortcut roads. I mean, I've seen it over my years in different contexts. I think about people where, like, I've had the circumstance where I have a spouse justifying an unhealthy relationship with someone else's spouse because, well, we can share and we can talk, and I'm just doing it for counsel. So, you know, they're counseling me, I'm counseling them, and so they justify it. They're helping me work out my marriage, even though I now like them more than my spouse. Right? There's a justification element. Or I need this substance in my life to help me settle down because life's too hard, I'm too spun up, and so I need just to kind of self-medicate. It's just a justification. I'm just trying to cope. Or my parents are so difficult and so strict, and so yeah, I work it around. Yeah, I'm not always honest. Yeah, I snuck out, but it's just I'm trying to help them so they don't freak out by what I do. Right? There's all kinds of justifications. Yeah, I lied to my boss, but I didn't want to get in trouble. We do it all the time. So there's always going to be things that are fearful. Doubts creep in that cause us to justify our actions. And yet in this, what's amazing is that God's grace in Abraham's life is bigger than his dipstickedness right now, all right? And it's so big, in fact, that God steps in with like a mafia grace. It says in verse 3, but God came to Abimelech in a dream by night, and he said to him, behold, you are a dead man because of the woman whom you have taken, for she is a man's wife. I just love that. Like, can you imagine you're just asleep, you've got this new bride, because notice back in the story of Pharaoh that he was angry. Why? Because he says, I took this woman as my wife and then found out it's your wife. I mean, she was fully like another man's wife at that point. And now again, Abe's done it. Kind of traded his wife off to be another man's wife, right? And God's like, dude, do you not know what you're in for? If you stay with the woman that is not technically your wife, Abimelech, we're talking concrete slippers, swimming with the fishes. Like, honestly, it's mafia, right? It's not plagues yet, but it's the fear of death. Now, it says Abimelech had not approached her, so he said, Lord, will you kill an innocent people? He knows it's not just him, it's everybody around him too, that God will take down. He says, and did that guy Abraham not say to me, she is my sister, right? And she herself said, he is my brother. Now she's in it too. Your sin usually affects more than just you. He says, in the integrity of my heart and in the innocence of my hands, have I done this at all? Did I go into this knowing this was the scheme, right? Now, what's interesting about this is that the text makes it clear that they didn't have any kind of sexual relationship yet, which is why he's saying, hey, this hasn't happened. We're clear, God. I didn't touch her yet. I was going to. And you showed up in my dream and freaked me out. Not going to now. But it's different than the scene with Pharaoh. Nevertheless, Abimelech is freaked out. He's saying, it's not my fault. Would you really punish me for something I haven't done yet? And God said to him in a dream, yes, I know that you've done this in the integrity of your heart. And it was I who kept you from sinning against me. This is God stepping in grace to a mess that Abraham made, even in the life of Abimelech, right? He says, so I kept you from this. He says, therefore I did not let you touch her. Now then, return the man's wife, for he is a prophet, so that he will pray for you, and you shall live. But if you do not return her, know that you shall surely die, you and all who are yours. He says, I know you didn't know, but now you know. And now that you know, you've got to make sure that you do the right thing, because if you don't do the right thing, it's going to go very poor for you, right? And I think the death penalty is pretty compelling. So Abimelech rose early in the morning, and he called all of his servants, and he told them all of these things. And then all the men were very much afraid. And Abimelech called Abraham, and he said to him, what have you done to us? And how have I sinned against you that you brought this on me and my kinsmen, this great sin? It says, you have done to me these things that ought not be done. And Abimelech said to Abraham, what did you see that you did this thing? What was it that when you came into our territory caused you to have so much anxiety that you would lie such a great lie? And then Abraham said, I did this because I thought there is no fear of God in this place, and they will kill me because of my wife. Now here's the irony here. Later in the Old Testament, there'll be a wise guy that didn't live by his wisdom named Solomon. And he had a great statement. He says, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. He also said the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. He also said fearing the Lord should stir obedience. So here's the weirdness. Abraham goes into a place, looks around and says, I don't think anybody fears the Lord. Frankly, the only person that didn't fear the Lord was Abraham. He's the only guy that doesn't fear God. He's the only guy making up stories, lying, conniving, scheming, because he fears people more than he fears his God. In fact, everybody else fears God more than Abraham. Abimelech is a better guy than Abraham at this point. Like Abraham's like, yeah, I'm just lying all the time. Abimelech's like, man, when I come to knowledge, I want to do the right thing because I don't want to die, right? So he's like, dude, we got to fix this, right? And that's a good lesson again. It's a good lesson in a different way, which is it's very easy right now, right, in our particular little corner of the world to say, wow, it seems like increasingly our culture doesn't fear God. And sometimes as Christians, we could look around at that and say, oh, they don't fear God, so maybe I need to scheme. I need to manipulate. I need to lie because I'm afraid, because I doubt, because I don't want to be called out. So I have to do these things to fit in. I mean, the temptation of Abraham is really at the door of us as American Christians sometimes too, where we're like, I'm not looking for trouble. If I stand out, I'll get trouble, but if I don't stand out, I won't get trouble. And so we face the same thing, right? And so I get where Abraham is at. Don't justify it, right? But I get where he's at. What's interesting is even being called out at this point, Abe is still... he's not well calibrated mentally between he and God, right? So as he continues to talk, he kind of compounds his guilt. So he says, I thought there was no fear of God in this place. A, And then he says in verse 12, besides, she is indeed my sister. And then he goes into this whole thing about, well, like, half cousin once removed, blah, blah, blah. Like, it's the same way he's like, well, the daughter of my father, but not the daughter of my mother. And, like, it's a technicality, but it works. Right? So now I'm not really a liar. It's a half-truth, smidge. Right? So he doesn't have a lot of ownership to his heir. And then more than that, well, because she was like my half-sister, she became my wife. I didn't even choose her. Right? So he's excusing more. And then he goes, and when God caused me to wander from my father, and then God, he made me go places. I mean, he's blaming everybody, right? But then he says to his wife, this is the kindness that you must do for me. At every place to which we come, say of me, he is my brother. No, not once, not twice, everywhere they went, right? So we have the song, Father Abraham had many sons. No, Father Abraham, many lies is what he had, right? So sing that song. Father Abraham had many lies had Father Abraham. And I'm sure Abimelech the whole time is probably listening to this just going, like, sister, half-sister, God made you, and all the time, but here's the problem for Abimelech. What did God tell him? This guy's a prophet, and you need him to pray for you so that you get better. So Abimelech doesn't have the luxury of saying, you little liar, get out of my sight. He's like, oh man, alive. And then this guy's got to pray for me or we're all going to die. The guy that put me in this place has got to now pray for me? So this is where Abimelech is a little stuck, right? He's like, what am I going to do? Verse 14. It says, then Abimelech took sheep and ox and male servants and female servants and gave them to Abraham and returned Sarah his wife to him. And then Abimelech said, behold, right, my land is before you. Dwell where it pleases you. I mean, Abraham's reaping the benefits of his deception. Sin affects usually everybody else around you more than it affects you. And then to Sarah he said, behold, I have given your brother, I'm sure he said it that way, given your brother 1,000 pieces of silver. It is a sign of your innocence in the eyes of all who are with you before any one of you can be vindicated. So he says, listen, I didn't touch her. I mean, here's 1,000 pieces of silver to prove I didn't touch her at all. And so Abimelech's really a better person than Abraham at this point, right? I mean, Abe is he's just a train wreck here, right? And again, it's sad because Abe is the one that's supposed to bless the nations. And twice now, he's brought God's judgment on the nations. But it reminds us that God is always with Abraham, even when Abraham isn't always with God. And for those of us who know Jesus, the weird thing about his grace is that it storms into our life in such a way that he is always with us, even when there's those seasons when we are not with him. Right? He is faithful to us even when we have those seasons when we are faithless when it regards him. Right? He is loyal to us even when we struggle with any kind of loyalty or propriety as it relates to him. And so God is faithfully moving in this whole scene. And in verse 17 it says, then Abraham prayed to God, and God healed Abimelech. And he also healed his wife and female slaves so that they bore children. So it appears that God just kind of stifled any kind of procreation. It says, for the Lord had closed the wombs of the house of Abimelech because of Sarah, Abraham's wife. And so 2 times in Abraham's life, we see where doubt overturns his faith, scheming is the tool that he uses to get ahead, and other people suffer for it, thus disrupting the very purpose that God has called him to begin with, which is to bless the people around him. Instead, he brings cursing. So 2 different times, fear gets in the way. 2 different times that self-interest or opportunity or greed or whatever gets in the way. 2 different times where he doesn't bless like he's supposed to bless. But then there's a 3rd time, and the 3rd one has a scope that is even bigger than the region of Abimelech or the region of Pharaoh. It's a 3rd event that has consequences that ripple in tremendous ways. It starts in chapter 16. So we go back between these two stories to the center story. 16, verse 1. It says, now Sarai, so this is before the name change again, Abram's wife had bore him no children, right? Just no kids to their name, even though God had promised in chapter 12 it was going to happen. He had ratified it in chapter 15 that it was going to happen, right? But it's not happened. And what's going to happen if you're a person who struggles with doubt and a promise hasn't happened? Well, you're going to start scheming. You're going to start trying to solve your problem in your way. And if you've coached your wife to lie and solve problems and take shortcuts that always end up being long roads, but you've sort of benefited from some of your scheming and conniving, maybe this is a good idea after all. Maybe we as a couple could come up with a scheme. Or maybe as a couple we don't, but maybe my wife, who's so used to seeing me scheme, she could come up with a scheme, and maybe it will work out well for us, and we'll be able to accelerate God's promises. I'm sure that will work, right? And so what happens is she has no children, but she did have a female Egyptian servant. I wonder where she picked up that servant. Told you, ripples, consequences. Your sins usually have a bigger impact. She did have a female Egyptian servant whose name was Hagar. And Sarai said to Abram, behold now, the Lord has prevented me from bearing children. Go into my servant, that it may be that I shall obtain a child by her. Now, fellas, if your wife ever comes to you, says, I got a great idea, you should have an affair with the maid. Bad plan. It's always going to go poorly when your wife says, you should have an affair with the maid. But that's what she says. And Abraham is what? A dope. So he does. I'm like, if your wife says to do so, and you do so, you are a dope. All right. So, it says, and Abram listened to the voice of Sarai. So after Abram had lived 10 years in the land of Canaan, Sarai, Abram's wife, took Hagar the Egyptian, her servant, and gave her to Abram as a wife. You ever realize that that's really what was going on there? It's not just, hey, you should have an affair with the maid. We should, sister wives, Cody, get another wife, So comes his wife. And he went into Hagar, and she conceived. All right, so new song. Father Abraham had many wives had Father Abraham, right? So, lies and wives. I mean, this guy's just racking them up, right? Try teaching the story to 7-year-olds in Sunday school. It's why we don't. All right, so this is a bad idea, right? It's a bad idea because it's a long, hard road, right? And even notice the phrase here, took and gave to her husband. Have you heard that before? You have, actually. In Genesis, you heard it in Genesis 3. The woman took and gave her husband the fruit. It's the exact same phrasing. It's this another event where it's just folly mixed in madness that sounds really wise at the time, which is usually how most sin is for us anyway, right? It sounds really brilliant in the moment. Or it sounds like you're not going to have any scars from it in the moment, but then there are ripples. In fact, we see the problem immediately as it goes into verse 4. It says, when Sarai saw that she had conceived, Hagar had conceived, she looked with contempt on her mistress, right? So Hagar's looking with contempt on Sarai. So Sarai said to Abraham, may the wrong done to me be on you. What the heck? This is your idea, right? She says, I gave my servant to your embrace, and when she saw that she had conceived, she looked on me with contempt. May the Lord judge between you and me. So the whole map is very simple. You should go do this. All right. And then, how dare you do this? I can't figure out why it went that way. So, what does Abe do? Since he's so good at passing the buck, passes the buck again. It says, and Abram said to Sarai, behold, your servant is in your power. Do to her as you please. like zero responsibility. Oh, I'm in trouble. Hey, honey, you should do something about it. So it says, then Sarai dealt harshly with her, and she fled from her. So Sarai kicks her to the curb, kicks her out of the house, says, take this baby that we don't want with you, this unborn child, just get away from us. And From that, there's this grief and heartache in the life of Hagar. She doesn't know quite what to do. But then it says in verse 9, an angel of the Lord came to her and said, return to your mistress and submit to her. Ow. That's a tough one. It says, the angel of the Lord also said to her, I will surely multiply your offspring so that they cannot be numbered for a multitude. So you have both a hard thing. Go back to the person that just kicked you to the curb and submit to her. Don't look at her with contempt. Don't be arrogant. Just submit to her. And I'm going to make your offspring also a great nation. It's not going to be the multitude that I promised to Abraham. It's going to be a different multitude, but I'm going to do that in your life. And you go, well, that's cool. At least she's going to have this offspring that has a multitude of people as well. But then the angel also tells her what her son is going to be like. Behold, you are pregnant, and you shall bear a son, and you shall call his name Ishmael, because the Lord has listened to your affliction. But he shall be a wild donkey of a man. It's like, good news. And his hand will be against everyone, and everyone's hand will be against him, and he shall dwell over and against all of his kinsmen. I mean, that's a hard thing to be excited about as a mom, you know? My kid's going to be a wild donkey. I don't know what to tell you, you know? He'll be that kid. He'll be picking fights on the playground all the time, right? And I can't help but think, like, so he's like a Mowgli personality, you know? Like, just spunky and everything else, and you go, that can't go too bad, should it? Well, it does. Now, it may not go immediately bad, right? But like I said, the shortcut sometimes ends up being a very long road. And the sins of one person has the propensity or the power to ripple and become this affecting wave that just pulls in tons of people, right? And so if we were to take the story for a minute and fast forward it, we go, okay, so Abraham does this thing, ends up with this woman that he shouldn't be with, has this child that he shouldn't have had, and then eventually God gives him another child that's to bless the nations. He has 2 kids, 2 heirs. Well, if we bring up this next slide, you can see what the result of all of that is today. So to put it in perspective, because of one shortcut, just one shortcut, right? My wife says I should sleep with her. We'll accelerate God's promise. To this day, this is what we see as the ramifications. To this day, when we turn on the news and we see that there's all this debate about travel ban, right? When you go to the airport and they say, can you take your shoes off, right? And you can only bring a thimble of fluid with you through the gate. And when we see the turmoil in the world and we see the billions of dollars, trillions of dollars spent to try to balance the Middle East, it goes back to one guy who said in his doubt, I'm going to take a shortcut that ends up being a very long road and affects many people. That's a good lesson. That's a good lesson, I think, for all of us who are tempted to such things. So in the realm of lessons, maybe what can we learn from today, aside from the fact that, again, Matt loves to take Bible heroes and destroy them? What are some lessons that we can learn? Here's the first one. We can learn about this idea that when we decide to go our own way, there's a lot of hardship and emptiness that can follow. There's a lot of hardship and emptiness that can follow when we decide to go our own way. In fact, if there's anything I know, there was a quote from George MacDonald that I read this week that was really good. He says, when you decide to do things apart from God, you're guaranteeing that you will do one of 2 things. You will either fail miserably or you will succeed miserably. Right? When you do things apart from God, you are guaranteeing that you will either fail miserably or succeed miserably. And I look at Abram's life all the way through being Abraham's life, and here's a guy that continues to fail, or maybe the best way to put it is to succeed miserably. Right? Every time he doesn't surrender, doesn't submit, it's hurt. It's pain. Right? It's things off the rails. 3 times we see him do that. I think a second lesson that we can learn from this is that we are reminded of our own fragile nature as human beings. Again, the thing I don't want us to do today is to walk away in judgment of Abraham. right? I mean, it's easy to do. There's some things that we should be discerning about and some things that we're certainly judged. But I would look at that and say, we're all imperfect people redeemed by a perfect God. We should look at Abraham and say, that's a cautionary tale of what I don't want to do, right? We're saved by grace, but I don't want us to look at grace and say, oh, so I can also hide behind it and do whatever I want because it's like a shield to my own folly. No, it's this wonderful gift of God that forgives us every single time, works even when we're faithless to make us more faithful. But we should never treat grace as like this excuse to just do whatever I want, right? And so we are reminded of our own fragile state. Another thing I think we learn here is that we are inspired by relentless grace. Because grace is relentless in the life of Abraham. I mean, there's no way you can't look at this guy's life and say, man, if God wasn't with this guy, then God would be against this guy. I mean, that's grace. God is with this guy despite this guy. And that is a powerful grace. And part of this idea of grace, I want us to lock in. Grace is not simply an agent of forgiveness. I mean, it is, but it's more than that. In fact, in Titus chapter 2, one of my favorite passages of the New Testament, in Titus 2, starting in verse 11, it says, "For the grace of God has appeared, bringing salvation to all people." Now, we're familiar with that, right? Like, oh, yeah, that's right. Grace saves. I'm saved by grace, not by what I do. Therefore, I can't boast. But then it goes on. It says, it's the same grace that has appeared, training us to renounce ungodliness and worldly passions and to live self-controlled, upright, and godly lives in this present age, waiting for our blessed hope, the appearing of the glory of our great God and Savior, Jesus Christ, who gave himself to redeem us from all lawlessness and to purify for himself a people for his own possession who are zealous for good works. He says, grace doesn't merely save you, it teaches you to renounce the things that harm, to renounce the shortcuts, and to pursue the things that truly bless. And from that, he says, declare these things, exhort and rebuke with all authority. Let no one disregard you. I think it's saying, don't let anybody disregard that this is what grace does. It forgives our biggest mistakes. It does. And it empowers us to not make those mistakes over and over again. That's a powerful grace. The fourth thing that I think is clear from today: shortcuts are never short, and rarely are you the only one ever hurt. Shortcuts are never short, and rarely when you take them, you are usually not the one most hurt. Rarely you're hurt initially. I mean, you can think about all kinds of examples. I think about sometimes when parents parent poorly, right? They lose their temper a lot. They're short. They use hurtful, biting, crushing words. And then the parent says, I'm sorry, I just lost my temper. But the kid carries that for sometimes life. Rarely affects you as much as other people, right? Or somebody has some vice in their life, right? Maybe it's just reckless spending. And you're like, I can't help it, I get depressed, and I buy things because it helps me not be so depressed. And then the people around you are more affected even by you. It's easy for the person that's the offender to say, I'm really sorry. It's hard for those who are offended to get past that. Right? And there would be countless examples of that, right? Teenagers that make poor decisions. I'm talking about parents, but teenagers that make poor decisions, and they go, Mom and Dad, I'm really sorry, but boy, the parents are wounded, and it takes them time. I mean, the list is so vast, right? And so it's just remembering that these shortcuts, they take more than they give. They just take more than they give. They take more time, they take more joy, they take more patience. They take your reputation. Sometimes they can even take your family. They just take, they rob, they take more than they can give. And so shortcuts are never short, and rarely are you the only one hurt. But here's the fifth and final one. In the midst of all of that, if you fail, if in a moment of doubt you make a decision, if in some hard crisis you scheme, and then you recognize what you've done, don't wallow in your failure. Don't wallow in your failure, right? If you fail, say, Jesus, I failed. I failed. Forgive me. I failed. and then get up in the newness of life that he's given and move forward. Here's what is a very simple formula. Satan, his name literally means accuser. Here's what he wants to do after we fail. He wants us to wallow in the failure. In fact, he even wants to define us by our failure. You're just a failure, right? Once and always, always and always. He wants to make sure that you know this is your new brand, this is your label. So he accuses. What God wants us to do is say, forgive me, I'm moving forward. Because grace has made it possible to be forgiven and move forward. If you know Jesus, he has forgiven you, move forward. He has set his love on you, not because you're awesome. He set his love on you because he's chosen to do so. And even when we fail and we are faithless, he is faithful because he doesn't deny himself. Familiar passage, John chapter 3, starting in verse 16. For God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish, but have eternal life. For God did not send his own Son into the world to condemn the world, but in order that the world might be saved through him. Verse 18, here's our operative verse right now. Whoever believes in him is what? Not condemned. Whoever believes in him is not condemned. This is why I said, don't wallow in it. If you blew it, Jesus, I blew it. If you have to say to other people, I blew it. I sinned, forgive me. Don't just say, I'm sorry. I sinned, forgive me. Realize that there's no condemnation. You're not condemned because you believe. You're not condemned. You move forward. If you don't believe, you're condemned for your disbelief. But that's a powerful thing. Don't wallow in your failure, because that's where the enemy wants to pull you down, get you in the undertow, and just get you in the turbulence. You don't want that. In fact, one of the favorite stories I find in the Gospel of John, it's familiar to all of us. There's a woman who is caught in the act of adultery. And the very judgmental religious leadership drags her to Jesus because they're thinking like, man, he's clearly going to have to condemn her. We know he's so nice to the down and outs and the outcasts and that kind of thing, but we're going to put him in a tough spot, which is the law of Moses says stone her. What should we do then, Jesus? If the law says stone her, Mr. Mamby-Pamby, what are you going to do with her? Right? And so then he kind of points out the fact that in all of them, there is equally heinous, destructive things. That's why I say we're cautious to judge. And so he says, well, if you don't have any sins in your life, just go ahead, hurl, grab a rock, throw it at her. First dibs. And then everybody leaves because they all know that they have some sin in their life. Everybody has a failure moment. And so everybody walks away. And in verse 10 it says, Jesus stood up and he said to her, woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you? No one can throw a rock? What? Everybody is an imperfect person? She said, no one, Lord. And then Jesus said, neither do I condemn you. When you blow it, or I blow it, I guarantee you I blow it. Right? The last thing I should do is wallow in it. I think sometimes we even do it like I need to punish myself. Right? Which is another crazy thing. It's like I'm earning my forgiveness but punishing myself now. But Jesus says, wait, I don't condemn you. I don't condemn you. But then there's a last little bit. And he says, and from now on, sin no more. Right? He says, yeah, you blew it. You failed. Don't wallow in it. I don't condemn you. Stop condemning yourself. They're not going to condemn you. No one condemns you. But do yourself a favor. Go and sin no more. And see, that's the part that closes the loop. Because if we just look and go, this is awesome. I can keep taking shortcuts because I'm not condemned. Then we're missing the last part, go and sin no more. Now, that idea of go and sin no more isn't Jesus saying, so that I can love you more. No, we said last week, on your best day and on your good day, he loves you just the same. It's not about his love. This is an act of grace where he's saying, you know what? You want it to go better with your life, don't keep taking shortcuts that create damage, that hurt you, that hurt others. Go and sin no more. This isn't about your condemnation, but this is about your spiritual vitality and health and a sense of joy and life and a sense of freeness. Sin never, ever gives more than it takes. It never is a shortcut. It's always a long road. And so all the more we remember, hey, I don't stand condemned, but why would I want to sin anymore? Right? And if we do, man, grace rescues and says to us, again, get up, go, sin no more. Let's pray together. Jesus, I thank you for grace that is powerful in the lives of people who any given day struggle. Sometimes we struggle big with big consequences. Sometimes we struggle small and no one may see. But left unchecked, it becomes this building aggregate, blocks the filter, invites bigger things. I pray that we will have that right blend where we hold grace as the agent that has made us right in your sight, the agent that loves us on worst and best days just the same, but also the agent that helps us overcome the things that do hurt others, that do hurt us, that ultimately grieve you and your spirit. And so I pray that we would become practitioners of a robust grace. And not just in our lives, but the lives of others. I think we have Abrahams in our life right now, people that we look at and go, that person's making tons of bad decisions even though they claim you. I pray that we would be those who come alongside and bear burden and show love and truth, not self-righteously, but as people that have been humbled by so rich a grace. So teach us to really find our complete sustenance and value in you so that we might do that in others. We love you and need you and thank you in your name. Amen.